everyone. Awesome. Well, I expect folks will probably trickle in within the next 10 minutes of us getting started here. Welcome to our Meet the Board member event with incoming Board of Director Dominica Henderson. My name is Clara Mable. For those who don't know me, I'm the Director of Advocacy at the San Francisco Bicycle Coalition and one of your 3 moderators for tonight's event. This event is being put on by us, the San Francisco Transit Riders and Walk San Francisco, and is an inclusive member-only event. So if you aren't a member of any of the participating organizations, please consider becoming one. We encourage you to turn on your video so that we're not speaking into a void of just people's floating names. And just know that this event is being recorded, and if you're not comfortable being on video, feel free to turn yours off or to exit the event at this time. So some housekeeping items and ground rules before we get started. Please keep your cameras on if that's something that you're comfortable with, and keep yourself muted unless Dominica or moderators call on you. We'll be accepting questions throughout the entire meeting. If you have a question for Dominica at any time, please send it in the meeting chat to question submission. If your name isn't obvious from your Zoom handle, please include that with your question, along with which organization you are a member of. We'll be working to prioritize questions that are broadly interesting to the entire audience, that address issues within the scope of the SFMTA board members, especially questions that address policy oversight, priorities, and process. To keep your question accessible to everyone, try to avoid using specialized jargon. We don't expect any issues from this group, but just as a reminder to please keep things respectful, constructive, and family friendly. So show of flow, we're going to start off with incoming Director Henderson's introduction of herself. Then we have some questions prepared by SF Transit Riders, WalkSF, and the SF Bicycle Coalition before we move into audience Q&A. So we are all here to get to know our latest addition to the SFMTA Board of Directors, Dominica Henderson. Dominica is a longtime public servant with over 20 years of experience in housing policy and has worked to support the Bayview community by improving housing policy and creating affordable housing opportunities for those in need. She formerly served on the Bayview Citizens Advisory Committee. Though the cable cars are not a typical Muni line, Dominica said the Hyde Street cable car is her favorite Muni line because her grandfather used to drive it, as well as other lines. The lines she uses the most is the 29 Sunset, closely followed by the T line. And so without further ado, Dominica, you have 5 minutes to introduce yourself. Please state your pronouns. I really hope I haven't been misgendering you this entire time, and tell us why you are passionate about transportation.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dominica. I'm a lifetime or lifelong San Francisco resident. I grew up in San Francisco, went away to school back east, and could not wait to get back to the city to be with my family, but also to be in the climate that we were just talking about before we started the call. I appreciate everybody joining me today, and so let me just jump into a little bit about myself. Like I said, I grew up between Bayview and Bernal Heights, so I grew up catching the bus. My grandfather was a cable car and bus operator. I feel like this is an important experience for me to be able to contribute and share as a transit user, but also as the child of someone who was an operator and I have a lot of family members that work for Muni in particular. And so I'm really excited to be able to share some of the experience that they have as employees of the system, as well as users of the system. So I was on the Bayview CAC for a few years, and that was for the Planning Commission, hearing land use projects and ensuring that the projects that come that are built and come before the Planning Commission are ones that are an effective use of the land and space in Bayview in particular. I am Bayview is an important community to me. I think that it's really important for the residents of the neighborhoods that are on the fringes and the edges of the city to have access in a way, and for the city to be as intentional about bringing those neighborhoods in and bringing those communities in as it was intentional years ago to ostracize or sort of cut those neighborhoods off. And I think that what is happening now in our local government in particular has shown me that there's a lot more intentionality and respect for, the things that have happened in the past and people have experienced in the past. We can't necessarily undo that, but we can do our best to do better. And so I think that that's what really interests me the most in this role and in transportation, because I want to make sure that it is easy, convenient, and a first option or first choice for me to consider alternative ways to get to my job in Oakland, but also to other parts of San Francisco other than using a car. And I think that we have a really good opportunity in front of us. We have some challenges, obviously, with the system as well, but I think that that's nothing that we can't solve, and I'm excited to help contribute to creating those solutions. I work for the Oakland Housing Authority right now as the Chief Social Impact Officer. So I manage our voucher program, which assists about 15,000 low-income residents to be able to live in the city of Oakland through a variety of programs, mostly the Housing Choice Voucher Section 8 program, but also through a number of local programs that we've been able to create using some flexibility from the federal government to waive regulations and create programs that fit our local community. And so I hope really to be able to use that kind of creativity and that kind of thoughtfulness and understanding about what's a better solution for a neighborhood or for a community or for the city than what is necessarily been practiced in the past or prescribed as a practice in other areas. So I think there's a lot to learn from other cities and other communities. I also think that there's a brain trust in San Francisco that where we can draw from organizations like the ones that you belong to, from communities and conversations that you all have with family and friends. I think that we can work together to be able to come up with solutions to get past this sort of hiccup that the system is experiencing now. And so I really look forward to it. I live next door. My family lives very nearby to me, next door to my sister. My grandma lives around the corner. And so all of them, my niece, commutes from Bayview to USF every day when she's in school. And so I really do want to make sure, commutes by bus, I should say. And so I do want to make sure that is, that continues to be an option that she can choose, that other students or visitors to the city or what have you can find a way to be able to enjoy parts of the city that don't often pop up on the TV shows and the movies, but also that it's safe, that it's efficient, and that it's proximate. I think that that's part of this too, is being able to find ways to make sure that transit and that other options are well located so that people really do choose it. And so I'm excited. I went through the full board last month, and so, but I have not been sworn in yet. So that will happen in a few weeks. And I look forward to working with everybody and getting some good work done.
Thank you, Dominica. That's a great intro. And I like a lot of what you're saying, especially about finding alternatives to driving and finding ways to connect the whole city, not just parts of it. That kind of ties into the first question that I had for you from the San Francisco Transit Riders. What does transit first mean to you, and how will you leverage your experience working at the community level to get that vision implemented in San Francisco?
Really, thank you. I think that Transit First really is an opportunity, and it's not just a suggestion. It really is a direction. It it is a way of a way of being, I think, that is important for our families and our city to adopt. I think that in order for us to be transit first, we really have to be committed to that. So there are some hard decisions that have to be made, some trade-offs that will have to be made. I think that comes with the territory, but ultimately it's about making sure that taking transit is a legitimately a viable option for people and a choice that people can make and know that they can get to their destination safely and in a way that is efficient for them and takes into consideration their needs, whether it's mobility or timing or what have you. And so for me, transit first is just, we really do have to embody it. And I think it's one thing to come up with all of the policies, but really ensuring that we are building out the system so that that is a viable option for people who are in the core of the city, where a number of lines intersect, but also on the fringe. I take the 29, and if I have to, I take the T. But that is something that is a trade-off for me. It's like, do I have the time to invest in getting somewhere on the T, because it's frankly, it's just slow. And so it's not desirable. And so I don't know that I can adopt a transit first mentality as a resident if the transit options that I have are incredibly slow. And so I do think it's just about putting our money where our mouth is and creating options for people to be able to choose from that can compete with the convenience of the car. And also I think that, a car is convenient, but it has, you got to maintain it, you got to pay for it, you got to gas it up, you have to pay for parking. And so I think we can also really be successful by helping the transit system compete with that car option. It's not free to drive the car. And so, for example, one of the things that I'm dealing with is that I work in Oakland. And so if the Senate bill goes through to increase the Bay Bridge tolls by $1.50, then that's a choice that I have to make. Do I want to pay to catch BART and catch the bus, or pay and sit in traffic on the bridge? And I think that's really what we have to do, is make those kind of hard choices and say this is what's best for our community, and then help drive people towards transit options before they are more likely to take their cars.
Thanks. And I'm glad you bring up affordability and also just putting our money where our mouth is, right? I think recently there's been a lot of talk about the fiscal cliff that's on the horizon for SFMTA and the threat that can pose for cuts to transit service and also fare increases on Muni. We know that transit fares can disproportionately hurt low-income riders who make up the majority of the people who ride Muni and often rely on public transit the most. So I wanted to ask you, do you believe fare increases play a role in addressing the fiscal cliff? And if so, could you address some of those equity implications?
Yes, I think that, no, that's a really hard question. I think that on the surface, yes, fare increases, we have to find revenue sources. Fares are one of them. But I very well know from being a Bayview resident for nearly my entire life that will have, especially at Bayview, out in the OMI and Sunnydale area, and even on the west side, all the way out on the west side too. I think that those implications may they just have different impacts for different communities. And so what I would say to that is that I don't know that I have a whole lot of enough information to say yes or no today, but I do understand that we have to find revenue sources to be able to resolve some of the SFMTA's challenges. I think that the Bay Bridge toll hike is one of them. I think that there may be some other creative options that hopefully we can entertain. Hopefully we can figure out ways to increase ridership so that we don't have to necessarily raise fares immediately. I also think that that SFMTA is doing a lot to understand and then provide resources to address equity issues. And so I would hope that as part of the work that they're doing, the studies that they've conducted, that there are some solutions that come out of that and some best practices that maybe have been tested in other areas that we might be able to apply. I would not just want to across the board say, absolutely not, fares are not, raising fares is not an option. But I would want to see that in conjunction with some other ways to generate revenue and figure out what the trade-offs are. I can say that from my experience in housing, especially in affordable housing, I say I'm a houser, but really I work in affordable housing. I have for my entire career. And when we hit moments of, the sequester, and I work for a federally funded agency. And so when we came up against the government shutdowns and the sequester, the question was, do we cut people off or do we thin the soup? And so my thought is that all of us have a responsibility. All of us have the ability to benefit from the system, but we also have a responsibility to assume our share of the burden of the trade-offs when we're confronted with them. And so I think that in that way, I would much rather thin the soup than make decisions that would decrease access entirely for certain people or communities. And that's sort of an approach that I would take if that comes up, as I'm sure it will in some form while I'm on the board of directors.
Thank you, Dominica. I'm gonna hand it over to Leanne now from WalkSF.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so Leanne Chang here, a board member at WalkSF. So my first question is about Vision Zero.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, what does Vision Zero mean to you? And given your life and your professional experiences, how would that help you? How would that help inform how you approach this issue, both in our equity priority communities in San Francisco and also throughout the city?
I think that Vision Zero is incredibly important to me. I think that safe, walkable San Francisco neighborhoods is what brought me back to the city and will bring people to the city, will help keep us there. I can say that in my on my block, now I've been in my neighborhood for a long time. My family was there too, and lives there now. We have a barricade that was installed by my cousin, and then SFMTA came and sort of saw that community response to speeding cars, and then put a more permanent barrier up at an intersection that had a lot of children that were on their way to school, get either nearly hit or hit by cars. And so that was a long time ago. But what I can say is that the neighbors and the community members want safe, walkable neighborhoods. I mean, that's what makes it feel safe and desirable to be there. And so I think Vision Zero for me is about implementing strategies that ensure that people are able to cross streets and safely and ride bikes safely without having to worry about traffic being being able to enjoy the streets as much as a car can, and at a comfort level that I can if I'm in my car. And so I think it's incredibly important. I really am an advocate for wider sidewalks, for the dedicated bike lane. I'm learning all the lingo, so you got to give me some grace with the terminologies. But I think that building the infrastructure for safe alternative to car modes of transportation is really important to me, because I think that that's what makes a neighborhood great. I have many parts of my neighborhood that doesn't have sidewalks. And so as a result, those streets are only available or accessible to cars and trucks. And so in order for me, for example, to go to the state park, I have to walk on a probably quarter-mile stretch that has absolutely no sidewalk. So I don't, because I'm not going to use that facility. It's not safe. People speed around. And so I can only apply that on a broader scale. I saw when I was at the Bayview CAC, I saw the SFMTA came and presented the quick build project on Bayshore because there had been so many transit accidents and pedestrian accidents on that Bayshore corridor. And so I remember hoping that the quick build project would be quick, but also understanding the need for it, that, you know, our neighborhoods and communities have changed. What was once mostly industrial and probably less accessed by walking, you know, people walking or taking bikes or other modes of transportation now are primarily used that way in some cases. And so I want to make sure that we are able to enjoy those streets just like a car could. I think that, you know, San Francisco has so much in terms of expertise and resources. And so I think that making sure that its residents and its visitors are safe is a high priority for me. And so top of the list.
Amazing. Thank you. You know, you did a really good job of answering not only that question, but the next question that I had also. So I'm going to kind of maybe ask something a little bit different for my second one, which is a question that I heard come up from a member of the public in a recent board meeting about the Active Communities Plan. And this person, who I can't remember who it was, they said, like, the city is coming up with this plan to bring this infrastructure throughout to, you know, the whole city. And the city is also talking about doing community outreach throughout the whole city, neighborhood by neighborhood. And if the agency is doing this outreach and coming to communities and saying, we want to hear from you, we want to hear what you want, what are you going to do as an agency if what you hear from the community is actually, we don't want this infrastructure? Thank you very much. You know, and then, you know, and then what to do, right? You know, if you've gone and said that you want that community level outreach. So I don't know, how do you think about that?
I think it's all, like I said, trade-off and balance. I think that, you know, if there's overwhelming opposition to certain infrastructure, then that is, you know, it's sort of to be expected. I think it's important to first that the staff do the outreach. I'm a public servant. You know, I work for a public agency for the past, well, for a while. I've been here for 10 years, and I think that oftentimes we have funding deadlines or other competing interests that say we have to get this project done and delivered by this deadline, or else we lose some things. And so I think that then can mean that we don't do as deep a level of outreach sometimes, or as cast that wide net. I do think that it's important to hear from, I know we won't hear from everybody, but it's important to really hear from a diversity of communities, because the loudest or most vocal groups are not necessarily the ones that you may hear a loud vocal no. I'm sure you're likely to hear, and I will be likely to hear a loud vocal no. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's not the best decision to move forward for the community and for the city. And so I would just say that understanding the balances and the trade-offs, hearing from the diverse spectrum of people that are impacted by it is going to be important. And then also, you know, things take time, but also understanding that there are limitations that we're all working under, deadlines that we're all working under, and we want to deliver. And so if the trade-off is that it stays the same, then I don't know that that's you know, a valid or, you know, solution. That's not a solution, especially if we recognize that there's a problem or a challenge or an issue that needs to be resolved. And so I think it's just, you know, the engagement, of course, with the community. And then maybe there are some alternatives. I have been, over the past couple of months, really seeing different examples presented, you know, in different presentations from groups of different housing models that might work. And so maybe there are different transit and transportation models that might work that are, you know, different than what we have anticipated or expected or sort of designed for a community, but that might work well and be responsive to the needs of the folks who are in opposition. So, you know, I don't know. I think it's a dance. You know, it's not an exact science, I don't think, but I'm hopeful that between the staff experience and the real concerted effort that I see SFMTA taking on with making sure that they are engaging with the community, revisiting an issue, or, you know, taking the time if there's an intense level of scrutiny or opposition. I'm hopeful that, you know, with combining the staff's expertise, their experience, their outreach, and just also hopefully I'll get the chance to hear and speak to people. I hear and speak to people about a lot of things, and so I'm hoping that I'll get a chance to add transportation to one of, you know, to my list. I think that we'll be able to come up with some solutions that are real, you know, solutions for the time and the best path forward for us right now. And, you know, if it's not the right decision, we make mistakes, we fix it and move on and do better in the future. And so I don't want to, you know, I'm not the kind of person that will dwell on it. I hope that those mistakes have a very little negative impact to people, and then we move on and learn from it and try something new. So, I think that would be my direction or my path forward to approach that kind of scenario.
Thank you so much. I'm going to bounce things back to Claire now for the questions from SF Bike.
Hi, Claire.
Hi again.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I feel like I jotted down so many things that you said in answering Leanne's questions, and some of my questions kind of feel like follow-up questions or add-on to what she just said. So something that stood out to me that I think is like also kind of funny, because you mentioned the Bayshore quick build and how, you know, you really wish that things happen quickly. And we heard like last week that Bayshore just started construction in a non-timely way. And so my follow-up question to that is, what is your experience holding city departments and staff accountable to deadlines? Because this is a recurring thing that we see with quick builds, where you know, some quick builds take a year, sometimes quick builds take 3 years. And you know, things that we've noticed are that staff and the MTA aren't held accountable to these deadlines. So what is your experience holding people accountable and so on and so forth?
Well, so I didn't mention this, but maybe I took this chance to mention it. I, for a year, worked at City Hall as a legislative aide for District 5. And so that was my quick introduction to all things, you know, SF Gov. And in addition to that, the team that I manage now is three different departments, three and a half different departments. It's about 150 staff, and we are responsible to meet the directives and goals of the executive director. And so we have baseline metrics. You know, we have outcomes that we are expected to achieve, and if we don't, then we have to respond to that. I'm not a fan of having to give reasons why we didn't achieve something. I understand that things happen, and you know, we can always explain that, but I think that, you know, I have very much experience ensuring that, and I'm sorry, I'm new to my role as the Chief Social Impact Officer. For the 10 years before that I've been at OHA, I was the Director of Planning, Implementation, and Compliance. So I was, and still am a little bit, responsible for helping create the policy, making sure that the policies are implemented in the way that they're supposed to, whether it's regulations or, you know, some discretionary decisions that we have to make, and then issuing compliance reports, and to be able to say to people, you did not meet this goal, or you did meet this goal, congratulations. And so I think that my experience with ensuring that city departments I have not worked for the city in a long time, but I can, you know, dial up my experience in the role that I have now, just to make, and the role that I've had for the past couple of years, to make sure that, you know, if there's a commitment made by staff, that everything that they do within their power to achieve that is fulfilled. And you know, like I said, I know that things happen, things come up. Who would have ever predicted that we would all be part of a pandemic? You know, so things happen. But I also know that there's the business of operating the transit system has to occur seamlessly and should not appear disjointed or you know, have a protracted timeline, because how do you increase the use of it if it takes so long for people to actually make it a habit? And so I think that, you know, my experience at the Housing Authority is going to come in handy with that. But also, I think I will have to remember what it was like to be in City Hall and work for a member of the Board of Supervisors, and you know, and hopefully, my boss always says kiss and kick, you know, so less the kicking, hopefully, and more just making sure that people the staff feel supported to get their to achieve the accomplishments that they've set out to, and to make sure that, you know, we go back to it, so it's not just a plan in a book, but that it's something that's a living document that we can refer back to and say, well, you said 1 year, so now why are we, you know, 18 months out with and still building? What, you know, what's happened? Let's not repeat this. You know, like I said, I think it's important to learn from our mistakes and our growing pains, acknowledge them, and then not repeat it. And that's sort of what I have to work with my team daily to remind them about as public servants, increasing our customer service and remembering that, you know, we are beholden to 18,000 residents of Oakland, and I think the same for SFMTA in San Francisco.
Excellent. Thank you for answering that question. And thank you, Leanne, for mentioning the Active Communities Plan. My next question is related to the Active Communities Plan. So Slow Streets is a program that is bucketed under the Active Communities Plan, and it became a permanent program last year in December. But we know that it is not serving all of San Francisco. So what would you say is the best way for us to expand the Slow Streets program, and how can we best serve all the needs of San Francisco's communities within the Slow Streets program?
I think so. I will start by saying I think Slow Streets was a great idea, and I think, you know, so I support it. I think that I understand that there are some communities and some neighborhoods that are not fans, and I think that there's also some work that has to be done with those communities about educating them. And educating them about the benefits of Slow Streets. You know, I think I can use my neighborhood as an example. Our neighborhood association really did not like Slow Streets. So they were like, when SFMTA came and presented, they're like, no. But I think that I don't think it was inherently Slow Streets that was the challenge. I think it was what's going to happen if no cars are going to come on this street? Are people going to park their RVs and live on this street forever? Are people going to sort of figure their way through the streets now that they're more open and use their cars in different ways and do donuts or do, you know, other things that are just not safe? And I think that there wasn't much opportunity for that conversation to happen. It was sort of like vetoed by the neighborhood organization, and SFMTA moved on to a part of the neighborhood that appreciated and valued Slow Streets and the mission of Slow Streets, or the concept of it, more. And so I'm hoping that that some real education can happen, because I think that it was a real opportunity for me to meet and sort of convene with my neighbors. I did use the Slow Streets or the Great. I would go out to the beach on the Great Highway and regularly, especially during the not the shelter in place, but that period right after we had to shelter in place, because it was great. And in one of my conversations with the supervisors, I talked to Supervisor Engardio because I was saying, I don't know how to ride a bike well. And so I was like, I don't ride a bike. You know, that's me. I want to learn how to ride a bike because I think, you know, I have, because I should. And so he was like, well, let's try it out here. Have the slow street, you know, get out, get your bike, get your helmet, try it on the slow street. And how else would I do that as, you know, a 40-something-year-old woman learning how to ride a bike for, you know, the umpteenth time in my life, you know? And so I'm hopeful that that I don't necessarily have to go all the way out to the beach to do that, but that we can really do an educational campaign, bring it to more of the citizen groups like the CAC, the Baby CAC, or the other citizen advisory groups, but also as part of the summer festivals and the gatherings that we have, the public gatherings that we have, really do some campaigning to get people to support it, because I think it's great. It's just about ensuring that the community has an opportunity to give their feedback, so that those things that we're worried about, that we're concerned about, that, you know, we want our homes and our neighborhoods to be safe and clean and dignified, you know. And so I think that I just think that that's going to be really important to help people understand that slow streets is not something that will be in conflict with those with those characteristics. And in fact, it'll bring different opportunities to the neighborhood for people to enjoy maybe parts of the neighborhood, or more time in areas that they would not have spent otherwise. And so I'm looking forward to its permanency, but also just to being able to expand it in certain areas that it is ideal for, because I would think it really does make a difference in the community feel. And I really am about making the neighborhoods safe. And I think that there was a proposal even to bring some slow streets concepts downtown. I think that would, that's such an interesting idea to test. And so hopefully we'll be able to do some of that and really find some support by generate some support by helping people understand how successful it's been across the city.
Thank you. I really look forward to doing that work in collaboration and in partnership with you. And shameless plug for the organization, if you or anyone else on the call still feel kind of shaky or want to learn how to ride a bike, we teach free adult learn to ride classes, and there are 3 classes that we do, and it's all for free all year round. Okay. So So last question from me, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience.
Okay.
Our city has ambitious climate goals of 80% sustainable modes of travel by 2030. How will you support and encourage equity priority communities like your own to mode shift?
I think that, again, it's about education. It's also about access and really getting in touch with people who are in these areas and in these communities. I think that equity communities, that equity communities are probably high users of the transit system. And so it really is just about ensuring that we have affordable transit that's accessible, that have enough lines so that there is of course a walk, but the topography of San Francisco is such that a lot of folks live on hills. And so we need to figure out a way to make sure that if you live on the hill and you live on the fringe, that's not going to mean that you have no option but to take a car. And so I do hope that like I said, the work that the SFMTA is doing now continues and expands to include those communities, to make sure that, where there are community institutions, where there are community groups, but also neighborhood centers and areas where people convene, that there's a presence there to help people understand the different options that are available. I know that there's a proposed neighborhood shuttle that they're proposing for Bayview, and I think that that's a great way to get people on transit, because if I can get from one end of the neighborhood to the other without having to take the T, really, but taking a little shuttle, I think that is such a good that is the best way to advocate for then using the system in other ways and using the main lines of the transit system. And so I know that all of that takes money, and I know that those are maybe not permanent options, but I do think that being creative about how we can meet people's immediate needs or neighborhood needs will drive us to then make choices and decisions to incorporate transit into our day-to-day. And so I'm hopeful that, and I do think that is the way to do it, is really to bring that education, but also to show people by producing and delivering options that demonstrate the city's commitment to reducing emissions and reducing carbon emissions, and to being transit first, as we talked about before. So yeah, I think, I look forward to being in all of the neighborhoods. Now I know I have to branch out and be more citywide. And so hopefully I'll hear some feedback from the community members in other neighborhoods, because I do intend to also be able to visit those communities and see how we can make how we can prioritize the commitment so that we can make transit a real first option for people. It has to be a first choice. I really do want to, I used to commute by bus and BART to Oakland for the first probably like 8 years. The pandemic kind of changed things for me. But I want to go back, because that gives me a chance to, relax, sit, let somebody do the driving for me. But it also has to be a legitimate option for me. And it was the bus part of my trip that was the hardest part, because it was not frequent. It was always crowded. And I live at the end of the line. So it just took so long. It was the longest part of my trip too. And so I'm hoping that with some of the small changes that are being implemented and some of the creative ideas that we can come up with, that we'll be able to really drive people by showing that the city is committed to just to prioritizing public health and the longevity of the city. And so I look forward to it. Hopefully that answers your question. I think that there's some more work that I will do to just see where we started from, and sort of know where we are and what our baseline was, where we are now, and then help contribute to the future.
Well, thank you so much, Dominica, for answering all of our prep questions so thoroughly. At this time, we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. And as a reminder, we are accepting questions throughout the entire meeting. You can send your questions directly to question submission in the Zoom chat. If your name isn't obvious from your Zoom handle, please include that with your question, along with which organization you're a member of. We'll be working to prioritize questions that are broadly interesting to the entire audience, that address issues within the scope of SFMTA board members, especially questions that address policy oversight, priorities, and process. To keep your question accessible to everyone, try to avoid specialized jargon, and please keep things respectful, constructive, and family friendly. Okay, I'm going to kick us off with the audience questions. At the top, we have a question from Jaime Valoria, who is a SFTR board member. The question is, how would you balance community input and the experts' input on SFMTA projects in order to approve or not approve a project? Let me know if you need me to repeat it. I know my internet is spotty.
I think that I think I got it. How do I balance? I think that sort of is similar to one of the questions that we talked about before. I think obviously hearing everybody's thoughts, understanding what the experts, and I'm assuming by experts it's staff, but maybe Jaime, if you could tell me, is it beyond staff and just sort of others?
Yeah, I think you sort of answered it earlier. You mentioned about depending on trade-offs, and I guess maybe I can modify the question. Like, how would you weigh outreach? Like, how would you know that MTA has done sufficient outreach and provided information that you can also trust that what they provide you gives you enough information to make a decision? Because we come across situations where you can get inundated with public comment, for example. Like the slow late, like hours of public comment. And then we also come across situations where they do so much outreach and then all of a sudden they won't use any of what the community have provided. So really, like, the question is like, when do you weigh the outreach, and what metrics do you need from MTA to provide you with like enough information to make a decision?
Thank you for that. So I think that part of what I've had to do is in my job is we present policies often we have a board of commissioners. We present policies often to the board of commissioners, and if they have questions about our process, then what we have to do is come back and show the alternatives that we've discussed with the community and with different groups, to be able to demonstrate that it wasn't just we presented one option and then we're coming back and now presenting that for approval, but that we have actually walked through different proposals, different considerations with the community, so that the community is clear about the different impacts and the trade-offs. And so I think that would be part of my approach, is just to understand what staff has communicated with the community about, but also in addition to what they're presenting or what they're proposing, what other options did not get to the final table for presentation, and understanding really that it's not just, of course, it's they'll present items that they want the board of directors to approve. I get that, but I think in order for me to know that it was a legitimate, well-rounded, comprehensive community process, I would want to see what the other options are that didn't make it through, that didn't get approval, and why. I also think that one of the questions that I get all the time is, what is the data not telling me? And so I think that that's an important lens to approach some of the staff presentations from, is I see what you've presented me, what doesn't it say? Or what is not here that next time I should look out for, or that we really should pause and make sure that you answer that question before. And I think that that's a helpful shift for me as a staff person to take that perspective and make sure that what I'm presenting tells a full and complete story. And so that includes the experience and the input of the different groups and stakeholders that I'm working with. So maybe that'll be my question for all of the staff reports. Not sure yet, but that is one that I have to ensure that, in my day job, that I get that question at every commission meeting. And so now it's sort of incorporated into all of the presentations, just to make sure that we're providing that complete and just accurate story for the commissioners to make a full decision that's based, that has a strong foundation, and not one that is just staff trying to railroad something through. So hopefully that answers your question, Jaime. I think that hopefully that answers your question.
Yep, thank you.
Great. I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to pass it off, stop talking. So the next question is, SFMTA needs to find new revenue sources. Sources like congestion pricing downtown can both provide revenue and discourage driving. How do you see the balance between mode shift, equity, and revenue to keep Muni running? From an anonymous SF bike member.
Okay. Well, I know that is such a widely discussed topic. I think it's one that will come up more as we try and ensure that more people are using downtown and visiting downtown. And I think that nothing's off the table at this point except for except for bad decisions. But nothing's off the table except for things that we know have not worked. And so I'm open to considering many creative ways to ensure that we have a system that is viable and can be widely used. I have very good friends that live in New York City. My friend does not drive. My BFF from college doesn't drive. And so I want to be able to, you know, maybe not abandon my car because there are certain needs that I have to use it, but certainly have it be that, you know, I really can have transit as a way that I get around to other cities regionally, but also to other parts of San Francisco. Because what I can say is that if once I'm trying to go to mile 1 or, you know, to the Golden Gate Bridge, it takes as much time on the bus as it does, you know, as it does in my car. So that, you know, that is really part of the response. I think that, and just part of that, the choices that I want to encourage people to be able to choose transit first. And so, you know, we have the state coming in to help, hopefully. I think that there are other areas and other sort of ways that we can get public and maybe private partnerships to make sure that the system works going forward. And so nothing's off the table for me at this point.
Thanks, Dominica. I have the next 2 questions that came in from the audience. And the first one digs again into Vision Zero, which we've already talked about.
Mhm.
You know, we've talked about it more from a point of view of why is it important and kind of the broad design, what you know, what we need to do. And this question gets a little bit more into the implementation and the timeline. So the question is, what is your vision for, you know, the roadway or transportation safety and the specific steps that we can take as a city to accelerate our progress on Vision Zero? Because our progress has been slower than we would all like. Do you have thoughts on, like, you know, the how of this?
All I can do is just go back to the, you know, San Francisco has streamlined its planning process to make, you know, I mean, everything, you know, everything takes so long sometimes when working with government. And so that's the downside. I think that we have the ability to, you know, as public servants and in government, we have the ability to lift communities that, you know, have been, that maybe need that assistance, and to make sure that everybody has access to the services, public services. But, you know, things take time. There are policies and practices that are built in to ensure that the equity is there. So for, you know, for San Francisco, I know that the planning process has been streamlined to make sure that we can actually get housing, and particularly affordable housing, built quickly. I think that the same has happened at the state level with some CEQA requirements. And so I would hope that if there's room to streamline some of the local policies, that we can do that and prioritize efficiency, but not at the expense of equity. And so, you know, I think that is a balance that I would defer to staff to be able to help clarify. And I also want to be clear that, I mean, I don't know what it specifically is for SFMTA, so I haven't had this type of briefing yet, but staffing is a challenge for a lot of companies, and public agencies are, you know, no exception to that. And so I also think that part of the challenge might be that we just don't have the staffing at the levels that we need to be able to move projects forward in a more expeditious manner. And so hopefully there can be some support around recruitment of staff or, you know, procurement of vendors. I think our procurement process that I have for work is subject to federal regulation. So it takes months to procure a vendor to, you know, really plug in light bulbs, you know. And so hopefully hopefully that's not the experience of the SFMTA. I'm not too sure, but I know that can be a challenge. And so giving as much support as is necessary to be able to have the staffing and the vendors move the project forward and build out that infrastructure, I think is also going to be, you know, important for me, and something that is something that drives my decision making. So It's hard. I mean, I think that we know that government is slower, and that's part of our job. And as I think citizens, but also my job now as a member of the board of directors is to make sure that we bring some efficiency, some transparency to the decision, so that where there are issues or challenges or bottlenecks, that we can resolve them and get it going. I want quick build to be quick. I mean, it's called quick build, so that's an important bar to be able to at least meet. And so I think that's sort of a delicate issue. I think both on the staffing side, the procurement side, but then also just on the regulatory side, or the sort of legislative side that we're all subject to. And so hopefully we can find where where there's some clogs in the timing and streamline it to make it better.
Thank you for that. The other audience question I have for you right now is about a big topic of the day. What are your thoughts about the place of autonomous vehicles or robotic taxis relative to transit in San Francisco?
So I have to say
And
that
that's sorry. I just want to say that's from Howard Strassner, who's an SFTR member. Sorry to interrupt.
got it. Yes, no problem. I think that is a timely topic, and I think that there's no way to talk about efficiency and not talk about AI and sort of autonomous vehicles and relying on technology to help make the city, propel the city forward. So I'll say that I think that there's work to be done, and I think that it's challenging because I think that there's room for it, but it's challenging because I just would want to make sure that the proper safety precautions are taken. That it's hard to imagine a computer making split-second decisions that I'm so used to being an emotional or a judgment call. And so I think that for me it's like let's go. I'm about being forward thinking, but I also just want to make sure that it's safe, that it is. I'm not necessarily the biggest. I'm not regulate everything, but I do think that that's a place where we have to have some sound regulations and some constraints that make sure that everybody is just protected. And I think that there's also room for it, and to help us be more efficient, to help us maybe eliminate the number of vehicles in some cases that are on the road, because people might be able to use the autonomous vehicles instead of driving their own vehicles. Or also, I think that I am someone who uses taxis, and so I generally use taxis and not the ride share, just because that's what I'm just kind of used to it. And so I think that there's also that balancing act of making sure that the taxi industry is sufficiently included in the discussions and the implementation of any autonomous vehicle projects moving forward. So I'm not against it. There's more for me to learn about it so that I can be maybe an advocate for it.
Thank you for that. And I think Dylan's got next to audience questions.
Yeah. Thank you for that timely discussion. This next question comes from Trish Gump, who is a member of SF Bike Coalition and WalkSF.
Okay.
So the question is, how will you manage the competing interests of people who want to keep the status quo, like prioritizing cars, parking, cut through driving through neighborhoods, etc., versus the need to make infrastructure changes needed to prioritize the health and safety of people outside of cars, including pedestrians, bikers, and other active transportation users?
Mm-hmm. I think really providing examples of previous successes and where there has been shifts in habits, shifts in infrastructure. I think that's really going to be important to present. I understand that we're human. We get it. I use taxis primarily and not rideshare because I'm used to it. So I get that there are ways where we can get settled into our routine. I also think it's important in order to get people out of that routine and to develop a new habit, is to be able to show and demonstrate that it is for the best interest of the community, and really provide that data that people spend so much time, staff spend so much time collecting and analyzing. I think it's just going to be really important to show past successes, show places, even in examples where it may have been more effective, or certain decisions may have been more effective if certain things were done differently, so that the community can understand that it's not just this big government trying to push something on folks, but instead it is really trying to make sure that the city is safe for everybody to enjoy. So I think ultimately we the people, the residents of the city, make up all of these bodies that whether it's the MTA Board of Directors or other commissions, we really are the ones that make up the constituents and the groups that are served. And so it's important to hear those voices, and important then for us as public servants to be responsive to those needs and be able to present a variety of options, so that it just doesn't feel imposed and paternalistic, but instead it is a community considered process. A community driven process is very important, but I understand that there are also decisions that have to come from the department, and so hopefully then they're vetted thoroughly and well, that they consider multiple different perspectives, and not just residents or not just business owners, but visitors, as well as youth. I think is really important to hear also their perspectives that sometimes get lost in the shuffle too. And so I think I think it's we talked about, I've talked about balancing act and hearing those perspectives. I think it's just about weighing the options, but knowing that there are many people that are impacted. So trying to make sure that impact is the least harmful to everybody, I think is the best approach. And then hopefully there are people who are super advocates and happy for it, and that everybody is ultimately better for some of these decisions.
Yeah, a lot of balancing acts, I guess, in this role.
Yeah.
But I appreciate what you're saying about kind of engaging the community and also learning lessons from, other neighborhoods, taking them and sharing them with community members.
And can I say one thing too?
Yeah,
I
of
think
course.
that, I really do, and I may say this because I am a staff person, but I really do, staff are paid to do the best job that they can and deliver the projects in, whatever the timing is that the agency has set forth. And so I want to be able to trust staff to be able to, and I do trust staff to be able to present the best option. And when if and when it's the case that there's opposition that is just coming in waves, I think that that's an opportunity for us to really say, okay, let's take a step back and let's pause. And so that's then I think where the timing question comes in, where things take so long to get through. And so I would hope too that staff are paid to deliver, to do the best job that they can. I'm hopeful that people can trust the staff are doing that, and work with staff to be able to bring forward those good decisions. So I think supporting the citizen advisory committee and the just the and groups like yours, and hearing from them and having an active dialogue, I think that that also will ensure that that status quo, where it's not possible, that we can get something that is amenable to, that people are equally is not disgruntled about.
Thank you. Yeah, we love working with staff and connecting our members. So appreciate you mentioning that as well. One more audience question from me before we throw it back over to Claire. This one comes, it's actually two questions combined. So it's from both Chris Peterson and Sarah Greenwald. They are SF Bike and SF Transit Rider members. The question is, to meet our city's goals around climate, we need Muni to not only survive, but also expand. What should Muni do to increase ridership, to increase the speed of service, and to improve the reliability of service?
Ridership, speed, and reliability?
Yep, that's right.
Okay. Okay, so I think that the ridership, like I said, I think one of the ways to increase ridership is to create these, I don't know if they're called jitneys or like little shuttle type services that are inter-neighborhood or within the neighborhood. I think that that really is a creative way to increase ridership, because it's getting people exposure to the system without having to do much. You can go around the neighborhoods and and potentially buy groceries and take the transit, because there's a little bit of a more convenient option than the train, especially, or the bus or the train, especially because it's on the track. So I think that creative solutions like that will help increase ridership. I also think, I know that the SFMTA is doing a lot of campaigning, just reminding people that transit is an option. I think that increasing ridership comes with increased liability and increased speed. So it's a little bit of a chicken and egg thing to me, or cart before the horse, or whatever the euphemism is. But I think in terms of reliability, that again is making sure that there are enough operators, that the buses, that the trains are efficient, that the mechanics are working, that the infrastructure that's built is long lasting and doesn't need to be replaced, and it has a useful life that is extended and will not be a burden to the taxpayer, that we build this infrastructure that now is obsolete in fewer years than we had anticipated. I think the same for speed. I know that the sort of dedicated lanes is a way to be able to ensure, like the Van Ness Bus Rapid Transit has done wonders for making sure that there's speed and increased sort of bus travel in that corridor. I heard that the 22, which I used to ride a lot when I was growing up, and the 49 are the highest use, sort of ride lines that are doing so well after the pandemic. And so I'm sure that the 49 is doing that well because of that dedicated bus lane. And so I think that those are concepts that that in practice, once we can present, these ideas of look at how well it's done here, that will help drive ridership, help drive that reliability, and make sure that people can get to where they want to go by using transit. It would be, I think that would be the best way. I'm trying to think if there are any, I don't know if there are other ways or campaigns. I think, fair holidays sometimes make people, more inclined to, try it out, and maybe they'll become riders of the system more. I guess that comes at an expense. So, we have to think about it. But I also know that there are ways to drive people to transit. That $8.50 toll is likely to drive me to commuting again on BART. And so I think that, and the bus. So I think that, you know, that there are ways that we can be creative, that there are also ways that we have that are already in our arsenal or library that we can call on to help sort of address those climate challenges, but also build a system that is useful. My grandfather came to California, my grandparents came to California in the 50s, and Muni was the job that that kept my grandfather in San Francisco and didn't have them move to LA or somewhere else. And so I think if all these years later, you know, I'm here and here's a system that has grown so much, has you know, an agency that has changed and evolved. I think that that is possible for, you know, 60 years from now, based on the work that we do to lay that groundwork. And so, I'm you know, I plan to dig in and try and do that as best as I can. And you know, we'll see. But I think that all the information and knowledge that we have today is really what's going to help drive those good policies and those that good decision making that we can do together. And so yeah, that's the way that I see that we can increase ridership and really make the system more viable for the next few decades, centuries maybe.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much. I love hearing that visionary and kind of innovative, some of those innovative ideas. We think ridership should be one of the #1 things. So great to hear that you've already got some thoughts going on around that. Claire.
Thanks, Dylan. So the next audience question that we have for you is from Phoebe Ford, who is a member of both Walk San Francisco and the San Francisco Bicycle Coalition. The question is, SFMTA has a history of large capital projects going over budget and taking longer than expected. How do you think about major capital projects, overseeing them, cost control, and trade-offs?
I can say that part of the work that I did when I worked in San Francisco, I worked on WalkSF, which was the public housing redevelopment program of Mayor Gavin Newsom and then Mayor Lee, and at the time. And so those were huge affordable housing development projects that we needed to deliver on public housing sites. So there was little federal money, and all of it had to be funded for the most part by local dollars. And so it was, you know, there was this increased urgency to build the housing, but also we knew the resources were limited, and we could not rely on the federal government to do that redevelopment as they had in past years under different administrations. And so I think that was a really good foundational experience for me on large capital projects, working to make sure that we're within budget, that we anticipate things happening, that there are, you know, contingencies that are built in, but ultimately that we don't have to come back and do change orders. I also want to say that I lived in Massachusetts, and so the Big Dig was this project that I lived there for 8 years. It was sort of happening the entire time I was there, and so I know very well that transportation projects can become monsters. And so I think that it really is going to be important to ensure that staff is paying attention to the costs and the bottom line, but also keeping in mind some unintended consequences of the work that they're doing. I think that there's, you know, obviously sometimes where we can't anticipate certain things. You know, if you're digging in the ground and you come up against, I don't know, things that you didn't expect to uncover, well, then that might slow a project down and make you have to approach it differently. I remember when there was when they were rebuilding the library, and there was this, they tore the library down, and there was this beautiful sort of Levi Strauss ad on the brick wall that had been there since the 20s or something like that. And so there was, all of a sudden, I think the project and the community wanted to figure out a way to somehow incorporate or preserve that that ad that no one knew was there until they tore the building down, or no one remembered was there anyway until they tore the building down. And so I get that there are times where those kind of things will come up, but I also know that the cost overruns, the timing overruns really impacts future projects and future development. And so there's, to me, little room for error when it comes to such impactful mistakes, and so I think that it's just going to be important for me to really rely on staff to keep an eye on that and to point out those where the trends are, to make sure that we are within budget and being able to anticipate those sort of oopses better. They're experts, so they got to be able to live up to that, and I think that staff, for the most part, have tried their best, and so it's just now is the opportunity for me to ensure that that part of that oversight that I can provide is getting at delivering the projects more on time, and also within a reasonable budget.
Thanks for that really thorough answer. The next question and last question from me is from Barnett Trzynski, who is a WalkSF
Hello.
member. And the question is, it's kind of a long one, so brace yourself.
Okay.
The U.S., and there's context at the top, the U.S. is an international outlier on deadly and ineffective streets, and American transportation officials are now often at a loss on what to do about it. Do you have personal experience with international approaches that work better, or do you have other inspirational examples to draw from? How can we directly bring these to the SFMTA and break the mold of chasing American strategies for streets that seem to keep failing over and over again? I like where your head is at, Barnett.
That is a great question, Barnett. Maybe Barnett had, since I think you might have been the first person to join, so maybe that's why you had time to do a long question. But I actually was in DC a couple of weeks ago at a conference, and one of the sessions was on transit-oriented housing development. I can't remember the presenter's name right now, but they were all international. So I don't have any experience of my own personally, but the examples that I saw in the presentation were all international, and it was all just such great examples of things to consider when you're in a neighborhood like this, versus when you're in a neighborhood like this, we can't get rid. Well, it's unlikely that we'll get rid of the highways. So let's incorporate them into the developments that we have in a way that that does not allow the highways to block regular everyday people and the users and the residents of the communities from enjoying the amenities of the neighborhood, enjoying the beach. All these highways along the examples of the highways that are built along the beachfront or the waterfront. And it's like, what were we thinking many years ago? And I'm sure that there was some logic behind it, but I think I did see some really good examples of international development that I thought were worth at least considering. And so I saved it so that I can bring it up with Mr. Tumlin and the team, because I think that we have much to learn. We are innovators. We are, creative thinkers. We are forward thinkers, I think, in the United States. But I think there's also things to learn from countries where we may not expect it, and also countries that are close allies and partners. And so I'm totally open to those examples. If I can, I'll go back and check my files and maybe share the name of the person that presented, because I thought it was a really excellent presentation, and he has a great sort of Twitter a Twitter feed that I was paying attention to. I wish I could remember his name, but anyway, I do think that you're right. There's so many examples that we can draw from, and so I'm hopeful that we're able to really be creative, and that's the part of my job that I really love, is to be able to look at other places, figure out what's worked, what's similar, and then try it and test it. If it doesn't work, then we learn and we fix, we resolve, and we move forward. And so I think that can happen from examples in other cities within this country, and certainly outside of this country as well.
Thank you so much for that answer. And I'm going to pass it over to Leanne for our last couple of questions for the evening.
Yeah, we might just have time for just one more question. And this question is from Barb Tassa, who's a member of the Bayview Hill Neighborhood Association. And and Barb says, is Barb here? Yeah, Barb's here. And Barb
I'm
says,
here.
Yay, hi,
Hi.
Barb. Barb says, I'm super excited to have a board member from Bayview. As a resident of Bayview, I feel there has been little priority for transit, bike lanes, or connected neighborhoods in our area. How can we connect with you to share area needs and get them prioritized at the SFMTA? And also, in your role, do you think you'd have influence with other agencies, for example, Caltrans, to bring more connected options to the Bayview?
So first part is how can we well, maybe I should start with Caltrans. I don't know about I'm sure that there are ways for me to connect with regional transportation partners. So I think that's something that I'll have to talk to the staff team about and figure out how that works, and just be able to explore. I am particularly interested in it because, where San Francisco goes, so does Oakland. And I intend to work here for a while. I've been here 10 years. And so I really do want to prioritize making regional transit and regional transportation more seamless. And so I think that I will figure out how to play that up once I get, officially sworn in and start working with staff a little bit more closely. So I'll start there. Second, I was a member of the Bayview Hill Neighborhood Association, and I was just looking at there was a meeting a couple days ago, I think. And so I was just looking at the agenda thinking I need to be there more often, but I definitely would.
Oh, awesome. Next one's September 11th. I'll make sure the website's updated so you have all the it's in person as well.
Oh, is it? Okay, good. So I will, I definitely intend to communicate with the Bayview Hill Neighborhood Association. I also am still very close with my Bayview CAC members and hear from them quite a bit. And so I am excited to be able to bring Bayview to the SFMTA Board of Directors. I think that Bayview is representative of a lot of the neighborhoods that are on the edge and the edges of San Francisco. And so I want to make sure that we are just at the table, and there are, I think it's sometimes out of sight, out of mind for neighborhoods like ours. It's very residential. And so I don't know how many people are coming down to City Hall at 1 o'clock on Tuesdays to do anything, much less to talk about transit issues. And so I think that there's a lot of connection that needs to happen and should happen at the community level, at like I said, the different festivals, the different meeting places where people are, the centers, the Bayview Plaza or wherever it is. I think that the staff team has some opportunities to be creative about how they reach community members and neighborhoods that sort of go under the radar. And so I'm hoping to be able to lift those communities up, not just Bayview, of course, but the others. And what I can say too is that I catch BART generally to Balboa Park Station. And so getting from Balboa Park Station to Bayview is, I don't know, it's like it's difficult sometimes. And so I want to just make sure that people who are also in that same experience are just not having that challenge for extended periods of time. I think that I have resources that other people don't. I understand that. I acknowledge that. And I do my best to remind people that there are folks that are not as empowered as me. And so I want to, and privileged, I should say as well. And so I want to just make sure that those folks are top of mind for the board members and for the community, for the staff and the community too. So yes, I'm excited to represent Bayview. I'll see you on September 11th, hopefully.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Dominica. That brings us to time. I did, before we break this meeting, I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us. I know I speak for all of us here when I say we appreciate you coming on and answering our questions. Thanks also to Leanne and WalkSF and Claire and the SF Bike Coalition. It's really cool putting on these events together and having some cross-contamination with our member groups. So thank you finally to everybody who came, and we'll be able to see Dominica on SF Gov TV 2 next month, I think, once she gets sworn in.
Yep, I get sworn in later this month, and then I'll be there in September, and maybe I will be reaching out to the SF Bike Coalition for for some bike lessons. So look out for that.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks again.
Right.
Thanks,
Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Can we also thank Cyrus Hall as we close out? Also,
oh, yes.
Mr. Question Submission. Thank you, Cyrus.
Of course.
Thank you so much, Dominica.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.